Well, hello and welcome back to our garden. I'm just after harvesting the garlic scapes. So these were the hardneck variety ones that I was waiting for the scapes to turn into this kind of pea shape, which they now have. And I probably could have actually harvested the elephant garlic flower stalks a bit earlier as well. And I'll just throw them now into the food processor and blitz them up with a bit of olive oil and freeze them in small portions so I can use them later in the cooking. But today I have a good few updates because I have been busy and I have made some progress on the field side of it and here in the kitchen garden too. Plus I have discovered a new pest that has taken up residence in here. So let me fill you in what I've been up to. Now for weeks I've been waiting for the weather to warm up enough just so that I could plant finally out all of the heat-loving crops such as the corn, the squashes, the pumpkins, and I hope that you can just see me now behind me that the corn is planted. And I had that bed basically just covered for the last 6 months with a sheet of black plastic, and I kept the plastic on it just to make sure the wheat seedlings will not start growing in it, and also just to keep the neighborhood cats out of it. And before removing the plastic, I had to cut down the huge red veined sorrel that was growing at the end of the bed and had gone into flower. I wanted to make sure of whatever was planting into the bed was going to get as much sunlight as possible, and because the sorrel had gone so big I wasn't going to harvest any leaves off it. I do like them to be just much smaller and younger to be used in salads. But once I brought the corn seedlings over, I actually realized I had more of them than I had ever did before, because my original plan was to just plant all of the summer squashes, courgettes, zucchinis alongside the corn. But I barely had enough space to fit the corn into it. So obviously that plan was out of the window. But obviously I still needed to plant the corn. So with the planting of them, I spaced them about a foot and a half apart in a grid pattern for the pollination. I've added a blood, fish and bone to the planting holes and mixed it with the soil, because corn are fungal plants and they had gone a little bit yellow now, being in the root trainers because they were waiting so long to be planted out. And this will just make sure they're going to get as much nutrition as possible. And then I also just planted the lemon yellow courgette with the corn as well. I only had three plants. I only had 3 plants of them. So obviously they did fit in within the little gaps that were left from the corn. But as I was prepping that bed and planting the corn out, I was next to the hoops where I have a lot of the brassicas growing, and I could just see through the netting that there was a loads of weeds there that needed to be taken out. But I also had noticed that some of the seedlings were not growing as strongly. Some of the Brokali had started to flower and the plants themselves were still tiny, so it didn't look right. I did know that the soil there's just still a lot of the original clay there, and I just had actually then started to question myself. Had I left the seedlings in the cell trays for too long before planting them out? Had I not prepared the planting holes well enough and the plants were suffering because of it? Or was it just that the spring was wet, it was cool, and maybe just the plants didn't start to get settled there as easily as they usually would? So I decided to pull some of them out of the ground just to check for clubroot, because that was my initial thought, just in case. Or anything like that, because the turnips on the other half of the same bed seemed to grow strongly, and the purple cauliflower seemed to have much bigger growth on its leaves too, even though they had started to discolour. But right in between of all of these new plantings, I still had some kale there from last autumn that was growing really well, so and looking really healthy. So that's why I was just thinking there must be just something wrong with those seedlings, and maybe, yeah, I had done something wrong. And so basically I couldn't figure out what was the cause of it all. And I just started to pull out some of the weaker looking seedlings, the weakest looking seedlings first. And they were all coming out with the stem very skinny, with actually no roots. So I could see it wasn't the clubroot. Then I thought maybe it was the leather jackets, until I found one plant that had a bit thicker stem, and I just saw something wiggling in it, but I still didn't actually realize what it was. And I also noticed similar growing issues with some of the plants in these raised beds in front of me, where I have the kale and Brussels sprouts growing. So I decided to do the same thing and pull them up, and they all just popped out of the ground too. No roots. And only then I started to see more and more of these tiny maggots. And I realized I had the cabbage root fly infestation. Now, I have been really good with the crop rotation, except for those two areas. And I don't use row covers, but I do use netting for the cabbage butterfly and over the metal planter for the carrot root fly. So I do use netting in the garden. And cabbage root fly is a very common pest, but because I have not encountered it in such a scale, I had not worried about it. Moving forward, I probably have to start looking into those circular discs that you can place around the base of the larger, like cabbages or like some cauliflowers. Now, broccoli would be perfect. Or then having to start using those row covers for likes of the turnips or even swede. So anything where it can actually get into the roots themselves as well, and radishes as well. So, and obviously still keep up with the crop rotation as well, and just perhaps that will stop getting this kind of a big amount of the fly laying its eggs on the base of the plant, and then the maggots getting them way into the plants themselves, or the roots of the plants themselves. And I suppose, truthfully, thinking about it, back on it now, I have seen little evidence of some of the turnips and swedes getting these kind of a little, some kind of a holes inside the roots of something has gone through them. But yeah, I never thought of it. It was the cabbage root fly, and definitely nothing to this scale now that I've had. And to be honest, I wasn't actually that upset about what had happened, the damage that had been done to the plants, because the sweet and celery here in the main planters are growing really strongly, and some of the other, I suppose, kale and Brussels sprouts seem to be doing okay as well. So this is just something now for the future for me to consider, and to figure out how to protect the plants in the future from the cabbage fruit fly. But another job I got done, and I really have no reason why it has taken me so long to do it, was plant out my celery. And for some reason I just keep forgetting about the space I had left in that metal planter on the other side of the greenhouse. Now, it's probably because I just keep forgetting about that planter, because I don't pass that area as much. But I'm delighted the seedlings tray is out of my way now, and the variety I was growing is Utah. Now, before we move away from the kitchen garden to the field, what I want to show you, the biggest change that has happened for me personally anyway, is this planter right next to me, where I originally had planned to plant asparagus into. Still has no asparagus in it. So this was my original plan, to make it into an asparagus bed. I had dug out all of the soil in here at the end of last year to get fresh compost in here and to just improve the drainage of it. And all of that soil then was moved over to the field where we're going to be going shortly. But I had left it too long, that my small asparagus crowns had dried up before I could plant them. But I did have 2 Yakon plants that needed a larger home, so I planted them here. The area itself is reasonably sheltered between the large stone slab, gravel and stone gabion walls around it. This area will have a great heat retention and will allow me to mulch the bed, just in case I will plan to keep the Yakon in here permanently. Also added a few sunflowers, a cosmos and leftover tagetes here. So we'll hope to see how they're getting on here over the summer. But hopefully they'll be really happy here and they'll keep growing strongly. So let's move over to the field now. Ta-da! For a while now, I've wanted to expand the growing onto the field side just to get a bit more space for the vegetables, especially for the ones that we do love to eat, and maybe just to get even more larger and a stable crop from those. As the kitchen garden space is just not really that big, and already at the moment I do need space for the pumpkins and squashes. So this area here is a very natural sort of extension to the growing space. And to give me a bit more blank canvas for the area I was dealing with, I have been using the plastic sheet to kill off the grass here. And I do find the plastic sheeting the best way of clearing large areas of land from grass and weeds. And I knew I wanted to leave a wide grassed walkway in the middle because I'm still due to develop this permaculture inspired border here just next to me where I planted the young fruit trees too. So we just cut the surrounding grassed areas as short as possible. But for you, because it's too hot already, you're going to get a heart attack. Now, figuring out the final depth of the area that I was going to use for the new growing, and perhaps even the layout itself, took me a little bit longer once I had brought the palette coloured beds over, and these are recycled ones, having been used to just as a transportation for renewable energy equipment, and they are heat treated, which is a bonus. Good girl. Oh, a bit stinky. Oh! That's good. That's good. So squeaky clean. Oh, that was cool down a bit as well now. Oh yeah. But once I put the sharp edging in, the spacing just feels right. And I had to move a bit of soil around where the colour beds themselves were going and just take out a lot of stones again. But all in all, once they were topped off with fresh compost, they do look as they belong here. Oh, come on, chuck, 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 chuck. There's a fine leather jacket here again. Rosie, Rosie, come on, Papa. There, look at that. And I still probably need a bit more wood chip between the planters, but for now I have covered the unused areas up with plastic again. That's only for as long as I'm ready to deal with those areas. Just to make sure the grass doesn't keep growing into the developed areas. So overall, I am delighted with the outcome. The pumpkins are planted and the rest is really tidied up. I really want to make sure the plastic stays as neat as possible. But this is truly how I keep developing different areas in the garden. I usually only stop once I've run out of energy, weather, the seasons or budget. Or sometimes you just get so overwhelmed by the job at hand or by the maintenance that just goes with it. But at the same time, it does bring me so much joy. And that's what keeps me going, I suppose, and makes it so worth it. So thanks a million for joining me today, and until next time. You ready to play?